Yeah. I begin now.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much. So hello everyone. So thank you very much for joining us. This is 44th ACM SIGCHI Mumbai chapter meet. Today we discuss the work related to women empower and social justice. Today's speaker we have Kuntal Da. So Kuntal Da is a trained industrial designer from NID, National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad. He started his career working with handcraft sector in India and other countries such as Southeast Asia. Slowly, he drifted towards non-formal and informal education and technology aid delivery for education for sustainable development. He believed that only holistic and contextual learning can change the world for better place and address injustice in the society. He is also associated with Commonwealth Wealth of Learning from last, I think, so 15 years. I'm sorry, 16 years, I think so. And he is a design consultant for lifelong learning and Girls Inspire Initiative. His subject interest and research interests are education for sustainable development, system studies development, technology mediate learning process, framework, and policy development. Thank you so much for Kuntal sir joining us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon or good evening, rather. It's already 4 o'clock. Before I move into kind of showing what I'm supposed to show today, the Girls Inspire project and its visualization, just a little more background about how this two things came together in my head, that how design or design process could be applied for other sectors and other areas like monitoring and evaluation, project framework development, and many other things, learning, of course. So I had started working with a little bit of different projects while at NID, while studying, and while working there. I started my career from NID, and one of the projects that came to NID at that point of time, I think it was back in 2002, which was a UNDP funded project for an impact assessment. And while doing that project, I kind of realized that, as a designer, one of the strong points that I have or any designer has is the ability to visualize something. So that is something which I think kind of took me to challenge myself as well as what I have learned, to understand if we could expand the application of design in terms of creating project frameworks, monitoring and evaluation, policy framework, and of course, informal learning. That is something which we've been doing. We've been doing craft in craft sector and many other sector. We were talking about informal learning, training program, outreach, etc., etc. But the idea was really to create a more structured way of looking at it. So without wasting much time, let me go and let me just show you how we started. So this is the front page of the Girls Inspire final report, actually. The Girls Inspire initiative was a very unique initiative done by Commonwealth of Learning, supported by Commonwealth of Learning is an intra-government governmental agency based in Vancouver, Canada. And they support, they started as an intra-governmental agency to promote ODL, open and distance learning. But afterwards, COL also realized that, or all of realized that there's a very strong point in terms of distance learning, how we apply it to livelihood or women's issues and many others. Like, for an example, right now we're working on a program, a course which is on climate change and food security. So that's the kind of work that they've been doing. Girls Inspire was a very very interesting initiative simply because of the fact that the idea was to address SDG, poverty, injustice, lack of justice, all of this, gender equality. But to bring it all together, uh, we realized that there is a huge number of very young women who actually cannot pursue their livelihood, their independent decision making, or even education, formal or informal, both, because they get married at a very early age. So we said that there is a fantastic connection that could be made between justice for women, women empowerment, preventing early and child marriage, as well as to create a paradigm where their education can actually support them to create a meaningful livelihood. So this was the broad framework. So I thought I would just quickly show you the report. I would share the report if you would like to read it, but yeah. So the initiative took place in Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Mozambique, and Tanzania. Now, this was also kind of an initial part where we were looking at how the trans community, trans-cultural values of the project could be built, how we could communicate with different communities who are really remote, marginal. And I still remember one of the stories that uh, we were talking about the speed of the project or implementation. And one of my colleagues from Canada said, isn't India being a little too slow? Or, and I said, yes, because we have close to about 48 degrees right now running here. So even for the baseline survey, uh, the uh, the community and the geopolitical scenario that we had to address was really diverse. And that actually created this opportunity saying, how do we start looking at something, some kind of an approach, which is primarily language agnostic, if I may say, because we are talking about a lot of languages, a lot of community, even within a particular country. Like, for example, in Tanzania, there were difference in cultural aspects and the language diversity between two areas of implementation. One was near Dar es Salaam, whereas the other one was really far away in a place called Misanzi. So some of them, these things we had to take into, had to be taken into account. So I'll share my screen again. So one of the thing that I must say that I have kind of looked at, is my screen visible? The presentation?
Very much, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So instead of creating a separate presentation, I thought I would present the original ones as we have done it and we went through the process. So this was the first presentation on how the project management or the framework that we had developed for the project management was done. And of course, whatever the planning was, part of it was a large part of it was possible to implement. But of course, as we went along, and the project spanned close to about 8 years, we learned, we did course correction, and we made a lot of modifications. So this is how we actually started when I was asked to plan the entire project. I realized that it's very important to relate the numbers, the communities, as well as how we are going to approach them, the different means. There were mobile phones, there were face-to-face workshops in the villages. We spoke to the parents because we realized that a large part of the early and child marriage does take place with consent of the parents, and the parents are kind of uh, forced to marry off their girls. We had quite a few case studies. So we started looking at each partner and what is the kind of spread that they have in terms of different means in the community. So this particular image that you can see was developed to kind of assist Mandeshi Mahila Foundation, which is based in Masot, very close to Satara. And there are a very unique organization as this was perhaps the only bank started by women for women, and they also have a foundation called Mandeshi Foundation, which is engaged into informal training, livelihood training programs. So this was actually a page of my notebook. So I was trying to really see it in my head. How do I look at different numbers? We are talking about a sample of 300 parents. So we need to go and talk to them. And the way we could talk to them is actually, we didn't want to get them to a workshop and talk to them, because sometimes that value, that impact value kind of is not much to their home. So I was scribbling all these things. So face to face, and while we were doing it, while I was trying to visualize it, at the same time, I was trying to find out what could be the intensity of impact for each and every approach that we use. Like, for example, Mandeshi has a community radio. It's a FM radio, which reaches close to about, I think, number. However, the impact assessment and the recording of that assessment, it becomes a real difficulty, and we may not be able to go to each one of those 4,000 people, and also interaction becomes a little difficult because we don't really know who's listening and who's not listening. Whereas if we looked at the mobile phone, we can do an app, and we can enroll certain number, and they can become a closed control group. So we looked at 1,700. So you see, this is what I felt was very important, because as a designer, we always try to kind of connect the seemingly unconnected dots and saying that, oh, okay, yeah, so we are talking about emotion and cost together, and when we design products, a similar approach was taken, saying that, okay, it doesn't look like that mobile phone can become a tool for baseline survey. And I'm talking about around 2015. So it's still not the technology of today, where many things are happening based on mobile. Uh, it was there, everything was there, but we were not sure. Networks were not kind of as it is today. They were very weak in some of the areas, even just outside the town of Satara. So keeping those things in mind, we started looking at the numbers. And then, of course, the face-to-face program, which had 300 people to start with. These numbers increased, drastically over the period of the implementation of the projects, close to about 8 years now. And we also had to change a few things from there. But this provided us a very good overall look at what kind of impact we are looking at from what kind of number, and through how we are recording how we are reaching them. So this became kind of the anchoring, um, uh, the anchoring position for all of us, saying that let's take it forward. So this was the starting point. Of course, based on this little visual trigger, we kind of created nodes, like, for an example, again, going back to the image, you can see that we involved the schools, we involved the banks themselves, the bank and the foundation offices, and we also looked at village panchayat offices and many other things. So each one of them were treated as a node, and we started reaching out and we started mapping this on the calendar. So I wouldn't go into the calendar much, but a few points, like when we looked at the number and the outcome together, visualized, the first thing we said that, well, if we have 4,300 and so on and so forth, let's not look at the entire number at the end of the project, but let's start looking at staggering that number so that it's easier for us to understand the impact and, if required, change course accordingly. So we had staggered. That's how that visualization kind of influenced our calendar making. We looked at staggered task. We looked at mapping of facilities, the NGOs or the other organizations which we are working with, to kind of see what is possible, what is feasible, and where we are falling short or going over what we want to achieve. So the briefing itself kind of went completely visual. For an example, I'm so sorry, the touchscreen creates problem for me. Ouch, I'm so sorry, something has happened. Now I can. So when we looked at, not the one, I'm so sorry, it's just give me 1 minute. Yes. So if you really look at the image here, this is how we were planning to kind of visualize the implementation part. So workshop with the trainers. Who are we going where to talk about, like whether it's Anganwadi, whether we are talking about mobile phones, or we are talking about going to the houses. Like if you look at the top left part, now that sketch was very important for me because we came to a conclusion after looking at the first part of, even before we started visualizing, we kind of looked at all the NGO and civil society organization partners, and we said that it's okay if you want to do gender equality, of course you have to go to the girls and the young women, but that's not going to be complete unless you take the men of the community along with. We really have to look at justice, women empowerment, and gender equality, I think it becomes more important to target the men and tell them what we have achieved and what the community can achieve through education of women and livelihood. That is a major step sometimes we don't look at when we offer programs only to women and empower them. That's a critical component. So somewhere in the back of my mind, it was continually kind of playing a role. And that little sketch on the left-hand side corner, if you notice very carefully that there's a boy and there's a girl. And pardon, that's where I think it became a very conscious effort, saying that no matter whatever we do, we have to train the men of the community and the society as well. So these are the why I'm showing you this is that these were kind of triggers that was quickly captured on in my notebook so that we could really look at it in long term. Also, while we were looking at these different nodes and different approaches, we realized that running an initiative for 8 years, um, we need to create a very, very strong feedback loop. And preferably, it has to be automated in some ways so that the data and the information collected, we don't have issues with their flows. So one of the particular way we could enhance that was, for an example, we were using SurveyMonkey at that point of time, and it was pretty bad. Though we had tablets with SIM cards in them, we realized that most of the field trainers or field workers of Mandeshi cannot get network while they are actually putting in the data. So we created a system where every 10 or 15 days, 15 days, I think, yes, every 15 days, these trainers had to come back to the headquarters or the nearby nodal office to report their activities for 15 days. So we took that particular opportunity and said, okay, when they come to the office, there's Wi-Fi, so you don't even need SIM card. Just upload all the data together. So these were small steps which regularize the data because it's very important. We are living in a world where most of our decisions are data driven. And this kind of data flow does help in putting in the processes in place. So this is one of the examples. So we put together a feedback loop, and we had specific roles and responsibilities also, which kind of were pivoted onto the way we looked at the monitoring, evaluation, and the implementation of framework. So we had task teams, we had project implementation teams, and each one of their frequencies to visit the field, etc., were controlled in a way. Like, for example, project implementation team went field, I think once a month, or once in 1.5 months, something of that sort. Whereas the task teams visited field much more frequently. So there was always mapping of data from one group of implementers to other group of implementers. So we could actually see if there's an anomaly in the data pattern, whether it's the flow pattern or the data pattern, very easily when by say about 1.5 months, 2 months time, just by mapping all the three sources of data. This became a major part, and I have already spoken about it, how we created this small team. So, and this is one of the workshops with the young girls and women. So this was a workshop to train them in making soaps. This particular workshop created actually some other course correction, is that we realized many places we do not have space to train these young women and girls because they have to come very far, and that means there is a safety concern. I mean, it sounds a little strange perhaps, but for some parts of Africa, some parts of India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, the safety concern that access to education or training is not just by creating the platform where you could train these women or girls, but also to assure that they can reach that platform safely. And this is something which we didn't realize earlier. There were a couple of mishaps that happened. And we realized that though there is a school and we conduct the training program there, it's very safe. How does that girl or young woman travel for almost 60, 70 kilometers, and sometimes the timing could uh, pose an issue, all kind of things. So how do we create a safe space for women training in the locality? So we actually shifted and we started looking at nodes or the points who are already amongst who are already been trained. So this particular photograph that you see is this is the house of the lady who is standing there with the soap in hand. And what they said, it would be great. I can give my house for 2 hours if you want to train, our community girls. So we created kind of an awareness saying that, okay, if you give a little space, if you have a little space, if you can spare, and the girls can really be comfortable being trained within the community. So this was a major shift in how we approached the face-to-face training program, because um, once we started doing this, we also realized that the horizontal learning. Now, this is something that we keep on talking about, that there are two types of learning that we see. One is the vertical learning, which really means how complexity is handled through that learning, how deep you are learning. And it's typically from one person to another. Whereas in case of rights issues, justice issues, and empowerment issues, we realize that there is a huge impact of what we call horizontal learning. So once you train one girl, she can go and speak to 5 other girls in her community. And that strength and that trust in the training is something which we wanted to kind of enhance. So this safe space concept became a major shift in our approach. So following that, we broke down again, what are the ways that we can look at the impact. So we were looking at not the regions that we are implementing the programs in, but we said, who's measuring the impact? Is it the branch who's measuring the impact? Is it the staff? Or is it we are looking at that 500 girls have opened their bank accounts as an achievement? So we also put down the impact in terms of how we could reach them, rather than creating an overall umbrella saying this is the impact of the entire initiative. So when we spoke to the civil society organizations, we said, okay, you have 5 branches. Give us, each one of them has worked in a specific geographical area. So can you tell us what has happened in that geographical area? Is there something that is different from this geographical area to another geographical area where you are working? And it has happened. It has happened even in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Tanzania, Mozambique, everywhere, that we realize that the localities are so diverse. The communities are so diverse. So for the learning needs that was identified in the beginning as an umbrella learning need also became so diverse. And it was lovely. I'll discuss those stories a little later part. So this was our approach, that we started looking at not an overall impact, but what we could aggregate as an impact. This I'll just go through. So this is one of the photographs where all the field trainers came to the head office with their tablets and trying to upload their data. Sometimes their tablets didn't work, so we helped them to kind of transfer and upload. So that's one of the presentations. I would go on to the next. This is the beginning where we started. Now, when it came to just give me 1 minute, please, so I can open the other presentation.
Sure, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So I hope you can see this, the presentation.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this was a summarizing, this was a kind of summarizing that we did after the end project evaluation and partial impact assessment. We realized that it's very important. What is the importance of context in each one of the impact that we claim that the initiative has done? Because sometimes we said that, okay, 4,000 women have been trained. But our question began, so what? What are they doing now? So we started looking at the context and the contextual response that each individual member of the program has done. So, for an example, let me tell you a story that we didn't realize that livelihood education or training could be a great marriage proposal as well for the parents. So some of the girls who we have trained, their parents force them to get married even earlier because they know something, and that became a plus point for them, saying that, okay, my daughter knows how to earn. So uh, and yeah, I can say that first time when I heard this in not very far from here, I was wondering, my God, now what do we do? It's taking a completely opposite direction than what we thought. But the first girl who got married, like who really raised her income within a very short span, her parent got her married, was Mayuri. She's from a small, neighborhood of Satara. But after, when we were struggling, when we were doing a lot of introspection, saying that how do we handle this? And Mayuri one day came back with her husband, and her husband said, "I want to go through the same program, and I want to have a bank account too." I said, wonderful. That's sure. It's okay. So we started reaching back those trained girls who got married, because it became, kind of, the learning became a part of their CV, if I may say so. And that's how we said, okay, this is a possibility of reaching the men of the community, which we didn't think of earlier. Now you see this lady, a young lady who's on the sewing machine. She's from Bangladesh, and it was interesting that what happened there is her husband. It was the same thing. She learned sewing. She was earning good. Her parents got married, and then she went to her in-laws' place, and she didn't know what to do. And what happened is her husband said, "Okay, I have some cattle. So why don't I do something? I sell off one of the cattle, which any which way I would have to do some point of time, and buy you a sewing machine." So some of these little incidents really got us to a concept called, there is a possibility of in situ learning for men through the initiative. In situ is in situation learning for men. So the moment this man, husband, fathers, all of them got back to us saying that, can we do something? Can we go through the program? We kind of assessed what their content is and tried to reach them as well. So this was the whole idea. Now, how we trained was, you see, there is a girl pouring something in a bucket. That was Masanzi in Tanzania. And what we did, this is another area where we really try to understand what they are doing on the field. So we looked at what they kind of can do and what their regular needs are. So we kind of trained them in soap making and peanut butter making, because peanut butter is a major household consumable in all areas of Tanzania and other places. On the right hand side, what you see is the training room that you can see with bamboo and all that. That's in Bangladesh. So Sidulai Swanirva Sanstha is a civil society organization in Bangladesh, and they operate these training centers in boats. So what you see is really inside the boat, but the boats were very well equipped. That was another design story we can perhaps discuss later. But they are all fitted with solar panels. They have their projection system, they have their laptops, and they have their networks. So that's something, these are innovations that we were coming across and we were doing. Why soap, where we started, is one, the local leaders came and told us that there's a huge problem of general hygiene in Masanzi. Even to get a detergent bar, to wash your clothes, you have to travel close to about 90-100 kilometers to the nearest town and buy soap. So that could be a great potential. So soap, phenyl, some of these things were very much could be in business locally if we look at. And thankfully, we took that road because one of the unforeseen impact that we had from Mesanzi was overall increase in hygiene level of people. Okay, so again, going back to Alliance, this is how we reach the community. One survey, one story, entirely illustrated, going back to the community saying that, hey, this is what, this is you. This is inspired by you. Why we kind of took this an approach is when I was asked that we need to tell the stories of the successful young women and girls to their communities to ensure that there are more participants in the program, there are more, kind of overall impact that happens. I happen to say, yes, we must tell their stories because they're our superheroes. And very frankly, as a designer, as somebody who worked with a little bit of media, there was only one way I could talk about superheroes, and that's comics. So every I will show you one example. So every kind of case study, every situation was turned into a little comic strip or a comic book and handed back to the communities. And when the girls saw that it's them and it's their incarnations on print, they were more than happy to, they actually put in their 200% to reach the larger community. So I wouldn't go through all the part of this particular one, but I would straight away move to perhaps just give me one second. Yeah. So these were the comic books about, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, very much.
Okay. So these were the case studies. These were the three girls who we worked with initially in Masanzi, Digna Faraya, and I forgot the third one's name. And we did some very, very simple black and white, as much possible black and white comic books, because we said it should be, I mean, we should be able to Xerox them and give it back to the community. So minimum of color, very roughly sketched. So this is something which is a small booklet of comics about them. So we spent kind of one page each for how their lives were before their training program, what they went through, how they got married, perhaps, and how their husbands left them or something happened to them, till when we talked about how they came together, creating this business of the first photography, if you remember in the previous presentation, they run a shop where they do a mud resist tie and dye. That's like a big thing for them. And the soap making and the peanut butter making. So they run a shop now in their village. That's, yeah. So that was really the thing. And when we spoke about all this, the entire of the case studies to the other women, it jumped. They themselves came back to us saying that, can we take our learning further? So that also helped us in backward integration, saying, okay, you have learned how to do a mud resist tie and dye. You know how to produce this fabric. Now let's look at tailoring, so that people don't have to again all the way 90 kilometers to get one shirt. So that really helped, because the more you interact with them, the more you get to know who they are and how you can take it forward. So that's what. So I'm coming to the last couple of things that I would like to share. One is how we looked at the in-project evaluation. Again, it was a little unique than otherwise what happens. We started actually looking at a lot of things which comes together to form the impact. And we realized this was just before when we said that we need to move up, we need to scale up. We came up with this concept while doing the in-project evaluation, or just before that, planning for the in-project evaluation, is there are three ways of looking at scaling. One, of course, is scaling up, which we are very focused on, saying numbers have to scale up, the initiative has to scale up. But we don't look at one very important component is scaling in. Every organization that is a part of the implementation or the initiative must also integrate their learning and their experiences in a way so that the organization gets better to cope up with the scaling up that happens. Because this is what my experience of last 25 plus years, that scaling up often results into a sad kind of it results into a decline of quality, and we realize that scaling in is a must before we scale up. So we designed the in project in a way that we are very clear about what we are saying when we say that this is what our impact is. I would just go to a few, I'm extremely sorry. I think I have opened a wrong presentation, because I'm really sorry about that. I'll just go to the other one. Yes. I wanted to show you a template, but I think both the presentation looks so same. I opened the wrong one.
No problem.
Can you see it now? task and processes? Is
No,
that what you see?
no, you have to stop this one and
Okay, stop
reshare it.
sharing and reshare. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm using Zoom after a long time, so sorry for the struggle.
No, no problem.
Can you see this now?
Yes, we can see task and progress.
So what we looked at is again the mapping technique of where we started, how we went through, what are the kind of alterations that we have made, and how we have learned as an organization from the project as well. And this led us to create this concept of theory of change. What is your theory of change? That's what we've been asking. How do you see change? Do you see change just in the participants' bank balance? Or are you saying the change has brought in a better social cognitive capital in the region so that they're willing to learn more, or rather capable of learning a little more complex, about a little more complex processes and scenarios? We started looking at the very basic thing. How did you understand the project brief? And this entire thing was done based on scribbles and all that we did in the beginning. We sent back those sketches saying, you remember this? This was 8 years back, if you remember. Sorry, 6 years back. This happened after 6 years. Can you tell us what are the kind of things that you thought when you saw these sketches? So those visualizations became very, very strong point for us to again go back to and ask them, remember this was your anchor, how did you do it? And based on that, we created this metric system saying, how did you anticipate change when you started? Where your anticipation was right, done. So it's kind of, we looked into the metrics based understanding so that again we can map each component of the project, each part of the community, and how we have done it, rather than saying that, oh, we have achieved 6,000 women have been trained. But where are they? What are they doing? This is the biggest issue with any implementation. I think follow-up is a bigger problem than implementing the program itself. And that's why follow-up is a much more important part of any initiative that we must look at. So we created all this, and yeah, we, even in the field, we were quickly jotting down again in the matrices so that we can say that later on also we can map what are the problems. Like there were a lot of cases where we said that there are the community couldn't be reached because of political turbulence. In one of the areas near Lake Tanganyika, we faced this issue that the elderly of the community says that early marriage has existed in this area for 100 years. Who are you to change that? And it's a part of what we practice as faith. So these hurdles have to come together and map, saying that, okay, this is how it must be done. So I thought I would just share my experience rather than saying that this is what the visualization process is, because to me, uh, you know, still today, when I'm working on a completely different project, I was talking about this climate change program, and I was surprised when both the funding donor agencies, the government, donor governments, got back to us saying that, can we see some sketches as you're brainstorming? Usually they don't. So it's interesting that how we started looking at that again in terms of skills and visualization and all that stuff. So I thought I would share my experience that as a designer, sometimes I work in the areas which I'm not supposed to, but
It was
that's what I
very enriching, actually, I would
thank
say. In fact, I was going through each slide. I was saying little more time so that I can bring a lot of content. It was
you.
every slide was having so because my research area is also low literacy, basically. So with which I'm doing with MIT Vishal Sir ke saath mein.
Okay.
There is actually I'm also learning about how visual we can actually low literate users learn basically. Currently you're doing any project other this as you said related to weather forecast you said the weather forecasting information
No,
about
it's not weather forecasting. What we have started working on is, we are building a community resiliency program
okay
um, for climate change impacts.
okay
Again, and this time we are going to work, we are planning to go to 16 countries to start. So the first part is to really look at locally mapping, climate change
okay
because this is sometimes I say that till we stop looking at only the polar bears on melting ice and
hmm.
start looking at our backyard, would never understand climate change. I
Right.
mean, Pune right now is 23% drier than it was last year.
Right.
We don't look at these changes. So
Right.
these are something that we have to first notice in our own backyard if there is an impact. And then maybe in another presentation we would I can share it with you. In 2019 towards the end, we kind of I was supposed to present a paper, and I presented a paper looking at what we need to do after to mitigate climate change impact. And 2020 pandemic gave us a very strong insight into what may happen in case of a impact climate change impact, like for an example communication loss.
Hmm.
And we realized that the first point that we need to target is the sustainability of the people. So we started promoting small scale and subsistent food production, processing, etc., etc. So that is the program that we're working on right now.
Wow, that's great. I would like to join you later on. I'll talk to you.
Yes, sure,
One more
sure.
thing I want to ask you. Still, that particular project what you have started in 2015, that bank related, still it's going on, or like how it is like?
Okay, how we define projects, and this is one of the things that I've been following. I always say that to make things sustainable, the implementers or the outside agencies like me or anybody else, they need to be kicked out of the program until they're called back. You know, so we have an exit strategy for each one of the program.
Okay.
So, for example, we started it as early as 2004 when we did a program for Oxfam, Oxfam International Youth Partnership. And we said we are going to run it only for 2 cycles of 8 years. After that, we are stopping. But what happened is that one single platform today has become close to over 300 small and large platforms across the world.
Yeah.
So this program also, officially from our side, we have closed, but they have taken it further.
Right.
So yeah, very, very recently, Tanzanian government has taken it as part of their own policy to look at. I think they also are starting it as an integrated program in the schools.
Okay, that's great.
So that's
Yeah. Any other question we have? Okay. Thank you so much, Kuntal sir. I would say it was our your greatness that we got to see all your side, and thank you very much for your time. And I would like to talk to you later. about the
Yes,
research.
surely. Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you, sir.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you very much.
thank you, sir.
Thanks, Raj. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.